If my DraftKings app would load, then maybe I could comment.
The tweet went out.
Contribute to the show. That'd be nice. If my DraftKings app would load, then maybe I could comment.
The tweet went out.
Contribute to the show. That'd be nice. My DraftKings app.
Okay, the link is working.
Oh, I was gonna say.
I always check to make sure the link's working at the beginning, but there's a little bit of a time delay, so it's weird because I'm just watching us talking, but like on a 5-second delay or something.
Exactly.
Okay. Tweets up, things.
Did you figure out how to put it in the right playlist?
No clue.
Can you ask at least so you can figure out next time?
Oh yeah, I thought that you knew how to do it.
No, I'll check. That's true. I actually did think I knew how to do it. I don't think I remember though. Did it once with Harris.
Okay. So let's see if anybody's in yet. We've got a few people in. Super. That's super. All right.
Oh my goodness, Martin Perez is pitching today. Right back to the Mariners.
Good time for you to figure out who's pitching.
No, I just randomly saw that.
All right, so let's start. We have Sunday slate, 11 games. We've got a good amount of the lineups out, but not all of them yet. I think that where we have the toughest decision to make, although maybe not really a tough decision for me, is we've got some expensive pitchers at the top: Lance McCullers, Luis Severino, Corey Kluber. To me, Kluber is by far the best of these pitchers. The question is, he's priced at $12,800. Do you think that's too much to pay for him? And how much exposure do you want him, if any, Josh?
I do agree with you that Kluber is far and away the best option here. Pretty good matchup. Yeah, what was Baltimore? About a neutral matchup, I guess, because they hit righties pretty well, but it's Kluber, so I don't ever really worry about him getting knocked around.
They're below average against righties, and they strike out a ton.
It's interesting because so there you go. Yes, plus matchup, of course. Kluber is the clear and away number one. I don't know if I'll be stuffing him in there today. I actually chose to not play Chris Sale yesterday too much. But that was more because there was such good cheap options. We agreed on Godley and Richards being just fine. Today, I would say my second favorite is probably Lance McCullers. Mainly a matchup thing there. Houston seemed to have really found their bats, and the White Sox don't hit righties very well. You'll pull up the stat for me on exactly what it is, but I know it's not good. So favorable matchup. Is White Sox what is that, hitter's park or what?
Yeah, so Chicago is a hitter's park. The issue I have with McCullers, and then I'll talk about Kluber for a second, is mostly because Kluber exists on the slate and he's only marginally more expensive than McCullers. And McCullers has such significant home road splits for his career. So for his career, he's a 2.42 ERA, a 5.09 ERA on the road. Last year, he only averaged about 12 fantasy points per game when pitching away from Houston. So to me, it's just such a high price to play for McCullers when Corey Kluber exists. And Kluber is, I know a lot of people are going to look at 12,800 because I already saw somebody earlier say, oh, McCluber. Kluber is really expensive. McCullers is really expensive. Severino are really expensive. The reality is Kluber is not that expensive relative to his production. He averaged 30 fantasy points per game last year. He's averaging 30 fantasy points per game this year. So for that amount of production, you expect him to be priced around $15,000. Plus, we also factor in that he's a plus matchup. And there's just never going to be an ace that's priced that high because then you couldn't make lineups with them. So to me, if you just target these guys consistently in these spots, it's long-term profitable. It's a plus EV spot. So Kluber's an all-in play for me, and these high-end pitchers are almost always all-in plays for me whenever they're in this kind of spot. So that would be my argument for Kluber. And I just can't rationalize rostering McCullers, who I think is overpriced, when we have Kluber, who I would consider to be underpriced for his production at just $1,600 more. So what do you think of that logic?
No, I think that actually is very astute. I agree with it. It's very difficult to justify. If anything, I would look to Severino before I look to McCullers, in all honesty. McCullers was just someone that I will have exposure to, but Kluber He is, like you just said, he's a 30-point per game pitcher. So he's technically still underpriced. There's very few people like that in this game. So I will agree that when he is on the slate in a plus matchup, it's hard not to go all in, or at least have be a little heavy on exposure to him. I'm still weaving my way through the 7, 8K pitchers, kind of deciding on my second favorite. Do you have anyone in mind that you'll be looking to pair with Kluber?
Yeah, so for me, my favorite pitcher in that price range, which I think that people are probably tired of hearing me say, his name is Luis Castillo. So Castillo was very good down the stretch of last season. He closed the year priced around 11,000, and he has struggled to start the year. He did have a good outing his last time out. It was the first time he really looked good. And the other thing that's nice about today is he's pitching against the Cardinals without Tommy Pham, I believe. I have to see if the lineup came out, but Pham wasn't expected to play. So Pham is the best hitter in the Cardinals lineup, and Castillo, for the upside he has, and somebody who could strike out more than a batter per inning.
Pham's out. Yeah.
So I really like Castillo. I think that there's some other guys who are worth rostering, and Castillo wouldn't be an all-in play for me just because he does have a lot of variance to him and he could get blown up. But Luis Castillo at 7,200 is my favorite secondary pitching option. Who else do you like from that price range?
Do you have any interest in Junior Guerra?
Yes and no. I much prefer Castillo for 500 more. I built lineups this morning, and where I used Guerra was if I had Brewers in a lineup as like a secondary stack for me, then I thought there was some correlation there where I had a better chance of getting a win bonus from Guerra. So at 6,700, if Guerra's going to get the win, he probably hits value. So I think that he's fine to roster at 6,700. I prefer Castillo, though. And the Brewers are also pretty large favorites today, so more indication that he's a decent chance to get the win. The issue I have with Guerra is just that he was really, really bad last year. So I'm guessing because you brought him up, you like Guerra?
No, I was just taking a look because he's similar prices to Castillo. I'm in agreement. The Cardinals lineup's definitely a little weaker than usual. I know it's only one player, but Tommy Pham and Tyler O'Neill have a pretty big difference. So Castillo is too cheap relative to his stats. Hold on, I'm pulling up fan graphs to back that up. But yeah, I mean, like as you said, people are probably a little bit tired of hearing us talk about him. But do you have any interest in Nick Pivetta? That's probably the only other guy I would even consider. But
no, because I think he's too expensive. There is one other cheap pitcher that I really like. It's not really in this price range, so going down a little bit. That's Yanni Chirinos at 5,700. Chirinos has been solid to start the year. He's not some super high upside guy or anything. He is a 2.7 ERA, a 3.5 FIP so far. He's striking out 6.7 hitters per 9 innings, but I just think that he's probably about an average major league starter right now. He's at home. It's a pitcher's park. And for 5,700, that's just really cheap. He's averaging about 13 fantasy points per start so far this year. And the other thing also is he's been on a pitch count. He's not on a pitch count anymore. The Rays are expecting to throw 100 pitches per start the rest of the season. So if we could get in kind of average starter at 5,700 who's going to be throwing 6 innings or so in an okay matchup against the Twins, I like him a lot. So my 3 favorite pitchers are Kluber, Castillo, and Yanni Chirinos. I'm going to have Kluber in all of my lineups, and then a little heavier on Castillo than Chirinos. And those are really the guys that I like. If you need salary savings, you could roster somebody like a Liriano or Guerra, but I don't really think either of them are terrific plays. What do you think of Chirinos, and is there any other cheap pitchers that you like?
I think Marquez is about the same type of play as Chirinos is, given the price. I know it's a Coors game, so no one ever likes to target that. But, yeah, I also don't think you need to go that low today. So I may look at Fultonowicz. I want to see what the Mets lineup looks like. But I'll probably stick with a lot of Castillo, as you said, and a lot of Kluber. I got to see what offense I end up stacking. Let me ask you a question. Is Phil Hughes still horrible?
I mean, he's been terrible for a really long time now. And also, this is his first start of the season. And
I'm asking for offensive purposes. Sorry, not for pitching purposes. So I'll bring that up later.
One issue with Hughes, though, is how deep is he going to go into the game? And that also matters for the Rays offense because they might get into the bullpen pretty early.
Do you have any interest in Liriano?
Yeah, I mentioned Liriano.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I think we've mentioned pretty much everyone there. That's
all right. So jumping into
RotoPros.com, we're going to offense, but yeah, sign up, guys. You know what's up. You know, there's a lot more than just this show. The chat room is 24/7, and you know, we give you the lineups and the skeletons you need to succeed, the content you need to succeed, and learn and do it on your own in the long run. So sign up. Don't just watch the shows. Introduce yourselves. Ask us questions. Thank you.
Okay, so the offenses, for me, it's going to be a lot the same as yesterday. I think this is another really good spot for the Seattle Mariners. They're still the same prices as yesterday. Martin Perez is pitching. He has been very bad basically the entire time that he's been in the major leagues. What's that?
I think I could hit him.
I don't think you could, although I have seen you throw fast pitch. And
thank you, Logan. I appreciate the
get up to about 70 miles per hour. So that's pretty impressive. Martin Perez started the year 13.14 ERA, 8.17 FIP. Those are all very unimpressive numbers for his career. He hasn't been quite that bad because nobody maintains a 13.14 ERA, but he's pretty consistently mid to high fours for ERA. And the Mariners offense should be solid this year. They're extremely cheap, so I like them a lot. They're really easy to fit in with Kluber and Castillo. They're my favorite offense to stack for the second consecutive night, and I really don't think it's that much different of a matchup for them today against Perez than it was yesterday against Cologne. So how do you feel about the Mariners for today's slate?
Very hard to argue against them. They pretty much have it all. Like you said, they're not too expensive. Martin Perez is horrendous. And, you know, they're certainly swinging the bats well. But my offense today, call it me being a little bit of a homer, but I think the Yankees are kind of due for one of those offensive explosions. Gleyber Torres is exciting. Is he even on the slate? I wish he was. Is he?
Yeah, he's 2,600 batting eighth. Ooh, I think Torres is fine as a plug.
Yeah, I like him, man. He's great. Anyway, so it's tough for me. Either the Yankees, the Mariners. Yeah, that's probably it. That's probably my guess for the two highest scoring offenses today. Do you you hate Cashner? You have any interest in the Indians' offense?
I mean, I think that they're in a good spot. The issue is there's 11 games on the slate. So whenever there's this many games, you kind of have to make a decision. You can't have exposure to everybody because you're spread too thin then, and it's almost impossible to turn a profit. So, like my focus is on the Mariners offense. My focus is on the Mariners offense yesterday. And I think the Yankees could score a lot of runs. I think the Indians could score a lot of runs. But like I said yesterday, what's the opportunity cost of rostering some of those expensive offenses? So yesterday I said there should be a lot of runs scored in the Coors Field game. But the issue with the Coors Field game is if I roster them, I couldn't pay up for Chris Sale. That's the same issue today with Corey Kluber, where if I'm rostering the Yankees offense, they're very expensive. I can't pay up for Kluber. So I would much prefer to roster the Mariners for much cheaper, who I think are in a comparable spot to the Yankees, but I could pay less for them and I could get Kluber in the lineup, which I think gives me more ceiling and floor to my lineup for sure, because Kluber is such a safe bet for points. So to me, I think that you could use guys like Giancarlo Stanton as a plug. You could certainly use Gleyber Torres as a shortstop. But I just don't want to go full Yankee stacks at the expense of not being able to roster Corey Kluber. So for me, that's why I prefer the Mariners. So it sounds like you're leaning Yankees over Mariners.
I think what you said makes sense, honestly. It's very difficult. I'll have a few Yankee plugs. I'll have a couple Yankee lineups. I don't know, single entry, it makes a lot more sense to focus on Seattle. Yesterday, you can get away with the expensive offenses because of the deep, cheap pitching, but I wouldn't feel too comfortable today with like Castillo and Liriano or something out there, and then stacking up on some expensive offenses like the Yankees with the Mariners plugs. So we'll see. I'll probably have that in one or two lineups, but for the most part, I agree with you about the opportunity cost. The Yankees just don't really, it doesn't work with Kluber, and Kluber could very well be a must-own today to make money. So let's one second. I want to pull up the over-unders real quick.
Okay, so question from Tristan. He wanted to know what my exposure is going to be to Luis Castillo. I would guess, I'm going to have Kluber's in all my lineups, and then Castillo's probably in the, like, 60% range or something, and then like 30% Chirinos, and then maybe like one or two lineups each of Junior Guerra and Francisco Liriano. But definitely my primary targets at pitcher, Corey Kluber, Yanni Chirinos, and Luis Castillo, with a slight lean towards Castillo over Chirinos. So getting into some of the cheaper offenses, I know for high scoring, you said you like the Mariners. Well, I like the Mariners. You've also said you like the Yankees.
Nah, the Yankees it's obvious. Everyone knows it. I'm just a fan who's excited about Gleyber Torres. But if I think Cleveland as an offense has a much better expected output today, in my opinion. I don't know, about equal with the Yankees. Cleveland's definitely probably a little cheaper. But Seattle, I think, that Seattle's pretty chalky, wouldn't you say?
I think that they'll be decently owned, but it's 11 games. So I never really tend to concern much with ownership when there's 11 games because there's so many options that it spreads it out. I was actually surprised how low owned the Mariners were last night. They had almost no ownership. I think they'll be higher owned today than they were yesterday just because of how overlooked they were. But I don't think we're going to be seeing any players in like the 30% range or anything like that just because there's so many other options and places to choose from. We have 11 games here. So in terms of cheap offense, is there any other place you're looking for value? Like, I think that Seattle qualifies as value and as a stack because they're not all that expensive. Is there anyone else you look at and say, like, oh, I would like to have these guys as a secondary offense to my Yankees or Mariners or Indians?
Double checking right now. I will have some Milwaukee, like you said, probably with Guerra and a few lineups. But other than that, the only sort of value I can think is Tampa Bay's offense, just because Phil Hughes is so terrible. But Minnesota's got a pretty awful bullpen as well, right?
Do you have music playing in the background? What the hell is that?
I have to mute the TV. Sorry.
Okay. All right, we lost. Josh is gone. Is he going to come back? Nobody knows. So here's the deal. For me, I really like the Detroit offense as secondary plugs. They're going up against Eric Skoglund. Skoglund has really struggled this year. He got lit up in his last start against the Blue Jays. I think he's probably going to get lit up in just about every single start that he makes this year. Skoglund for the year has a 9.31 ERA, 6.25 FIP. Do those numbers seem high? Yes, but for his career, 9.43 ERA, 5.47 FIP. Last year, 9.5 ERA, 5.05 FIP. He's absolute garbage. The Tigers don't have a great offense, but they have some individual guys who hit pretty well. We've got Miguel Cabrera, who's relatively cheap at 3,900. Nick Castellanos, I think, is a good outfield play at 4,400. James McCann, I like a catcher at 2,900. So I like the Tigers as secondary plays. And then if you're not comfortable with using a lot of Castillo, I think you could use some of those Tigers plugs with Liriano as a secondary pitcher, because if those guys do well, Liriano is pretty likely to pick up the win, and it's an easy matchup for Liriano against the Royals. So I like the Tigers as a secondary offense. If I'm going in terms of offenses that I want to target the most, it's Seattle 1 for me, and then it's Detroit 2, Milwaukee 3, and then some cheap Texas guys also for me. And that's where I'm focusing my offense. What do you think of the Tigers?
I love them. I'm actually in the process of pulling up Castellanos' in-depth numbers right now. Versus righty, that's a low. Excuse me, versus lefty is a righty. Yeah, he hits 4.7. I mean, look, it's only 12 at bats this year, but he's hitting 417 off of lefties. Let's see last year. I know he's got great career numbers against 2017. Sorry, I was looking at just 18 against lefties. So Castellanos is one of the better plugs today. How expensive is he? He's got to be close to 5K, right?
No, still 43. So he is. So I mean, he's relatively cheap. All the Tigers are pretty cheap, so I like them as secondary plugs. And I think for their price tags, there's upside there. Castellanos is a very good hitter. Actually, I think he was. Let me bring it up real quick. He was one of the better hitters in the American League last year. And
real quick, while you look that up, for Logan, cheap plugs, Denard Span's probably my number one. Phil Hughes is awful. He's 2,800, and he's a leadoff hitter, lefty-righty at home. I like Denard Span. Is Yerkson Profar a good hitter at all?
Well, here's the issue I have with Profar. He is cheap, except I generally don't really like guys who are hitting towards the bottom of the lineup who I would use as plugs. Like I would much prefer to use Ian Kinsler Falafel, who is at, what is it, Ian Kiner Lefo, whatever. Ian Kinsler Falafel, that's what I call him. Yeah. I think that I would much prefer to use him. He's been hitting second, and he's about the same price. And I think that he might be.
Must have literally just switched the order then, because Profar was hitting second for like a week.
Falafel hit. Yeah, Falafel's hit second in 3 of the last 4 games.
It's crazy. Profar must have hit second in 3 of the last 4 before that one. But doesn't matter. I'm not that big on him anyway. I was just curious. No, Denard Span, Gene Segura against lefties. We all know his numbers are great. That's in Seattle. Martin Perez is a joke. I like Gleyber Torres as a Yankee fan. I'm excited. I think the whole club is excited for his call up. So, there's always a possibility. Lefty-righty, good matchup at home. The Yankees know everything that you need to know about Jaime Garcia, as he used to be on the squad. Yeah, so that's it for me for cheap plugs. Greg, what do you think of the Milwaukee stack? We got a question.
Well, this question is actually specifically for you.
Fine,
and that is, Lauren wants to know what you think of Milwaukee stack. I don't know who Lauren is.
That's his wife, so.
Okay.
She's I'm very glad to hear she's taking an interest in DFS. That's very good news. But Milwaukee stack, I like it, Lauren. You have a good eye there. Caleb Smith is pretty terrible. He's the pitcher from Miami, and Milwaukee is a great ballpark, clearly a hitter's park, and they swing for the fences. They're coming off a walk-off last night. So I would stack probably the righties in the top 6 for them with probably Shaw. I think he's cheaper than Yelich. So Milwaukee stack's definitely in play for sure. How are they price-wise, Greg?
They're very expensive.
So yeah, there you go. Maybe I won't have as much of it because of the price, but definitely expect some good run totals out of that game today.
All right, but does anybody else have any questions for this slate? Somebody else who I still like as a plug is Albert Almora is 3,200 hitting leadoff again for the Cubs. So 3,200 for somebody at Coors Field, it's like I said yesterday, that's just way too cheap for anybody playing at Coors Field, but especially a leadoff hitter. And Almora is kind of decent also. His last few games, 12 fantasy points, 24 fantasy points, 7 fantasy points. Those are all as the leadoff. He's gotten a hit in every game that he's led off so far this year. He does hit lefties better than he hits righties, except it's still Coors Field. It's a huge bump for him. I really like him as a cheap plug for the 2nd consecutive day. Aaron Hicks is hitting leadoff for the Yankees at 3,400. I think that's a good spot for him, and that's pretty cheap. Other cheap guys.
I like Hernan. Kobe Jones.
Let's see.
2,800 respectively.
Yeah, I don't mind either of them. My one concern with Hernan Perez is he does get pinch hit for a lot. So yeah,
Tommy La Stella is another guy actually that I'm definitely gonna have some exposure to today. I saw that man literally win people the Fantasy Baseball World Championship. So people like him that like go under the radar, they're cheap, and they just randomly pop in with 2 home runs. Nice to have some exposure to.
Yeah, I'm not going to roster Tommy La Stella tonight.
Coors Field. Why? How are you going to roster Albert Almora and not him? Like, Albert Almora hits lefties, not righties.
Tommy La Stella doesn't hit lefties or righties.
He hits righties.
So let's bring up Tommy La Stella for his career. And also, there's such a big difference between batting leadoff and batting 6th. And La Stella is going to get pinch hit for in this game also. So La Stella hits lefties. He does not hit righties at all.
That's crazy. So why would they be playing him against a righty if he hits lefties better?
Why does it? But that's what it is. He for his career he has a 94 WRC plus against righties and 129 against lefties. He hits lefties well. He doesn't hit righties well.
Yeah, well, the numbers don't lie. So Can't argue with
All right,
that. So I guess I won't have much exposure to Estella. That's why we have this show. Sometimes we're still weeding out guys as well, guys. So it's good for us too.
All right, I'm going to hold 1 second to see if we have any more questions. If not, then we could wrap this up. Nope, that is going to be the end. All right, thanks for listening, guys.
Wait, give a home run call for the boys.
Giancarlo Stanton.
Oh, okay. I'll try and be a little off the map here. Giancarlo is obviously a good call. I wouldn't call it.
Is the idea to pick somebody who I actually think is going to hit a home run, or just
no? It's the idea is to pick someone that no one expected you to pick. No, I'm just kidding with you. I say Joey Gallo. That's my call.
All right. So lock it in. Josh says Tommy La Stella homers today. You could follow me on Twitter, GRMDFS, the RotoPros Twitter handle. Twiddle handle?
What's the Twiddle handle?
Who the fuck knows? RotoPros DFS. Also, go to rotopros.com and you could sign up for a subscription. That'll do it for today's show. Thanks for watching, guys.
Thank you. Have a good Sunday, everybody. And I'll be back in a few days. I'm traveling for a bit, but